what I want to try to address as the first fundamental point for me is what the election results mean with regards to Zimbabwe's transition towards democratization. We have said for a very long time now that Zimbabwe is in a transition that we initially thought was irreversible. Of course, indications are that at the end of the day, there's nothing that is irreversible, given some things that we're beginning to see on the ground, that it is actually possible to go back instead of continuing to move forward. So there are questions that are beginning to be raised with regards to which direction the transition in Zimbabwe is taking. Our own institutional view has been that we have avoided as a country some of the more disparate versions of transitional outcomes, where transitions are totally blocked, where you lose all hope because of the flaws that you see with regards to that particular transitional process. Our view is that Zimbabwe is in a state of prolonged transition. Again, this is something that perhaps people who are involved in the struggle can say to continue to strengthen themselves in spite of implications on the ground. But it's a view that we believe in. We believe that 5 years that we had of the inclusive government would not have been enough for the country to democratize, that 5-year period was a foundational school for democratization, and that there would have been need for additional work to be done post-election, irrespective of who would have won that election. Now, as it turns out, Robert Mugabe has won that election. The question that then gets to be posed is, would the situation have been any different had there been a different outcome to that particular election? In our submission, we believe that there wouldn't have been much of a difference with regards to the trajectory that the transition would have taken. Like I said, it's a process, and as a process, it would have taken more than just a victory by the NDC to head out democratization in Zimbabwe. The path that our transition takes, it depends on a number of factors. It depends on what we do as civic society actors. It depends on what those who are presiding over the state do, and it depends on the role that is played by you as solidarity partners. And that's something that I will speak about just in terms of just when I begin to close my submission. But I was making a point that if the NDC had won that election, there are possibilities that the transition would still have been prolonged. Of course, the direction that they could have taken could have been different from the one that we're seeing now, but our contention is that the transition would still have been prolonged. Why do I say that this was likely to be the situation? There are several things that we have noticed with regards to the way that things run and operate in Zimbabwe. Number one is the nature of the state itself. There has been a problem, and I think this is something that is familiar to you as a solidarity movement, and one that mutated into its current form from the anti-apartheid movement. That one of the biggest problems that we're faced on the continent, and not just in Zimbabwe, is that those who liberate us, who take over the state from those who have colonized us, at the end of the day, do not behave any different from those who would have been colonizing us.
Sure.
That at the end of the day, you've got a trade between a white master into a black one. And I think that in Zimbabwe, that is largely what has happened. Before coming here today, I woke up and read the Herald, which is our biggest daily newspaper. It's state-owned. And there is a guy who writes a column in that newspaper called Nathaniel Maneru. There is suspicion that this Nathaniel Maneru is the current Minister of Information or the Secretary for Information. One of those two people is responsible for that column. And today, in that column, he was going to town, full-page attack on the spokesperson of the organization that I work for, a guy called Tabani Nyoni. Because Tabani Nyoni at an event last week in Bulawayo had the audacity to say that there is nothing wrong with regime change. That if people say they want to pursue regime change, they should be allowed to do that. There's nothing wrong. Besides, that's how we have elections, and if regimes do not perform, regimes need to be changed. Nathaniel Maneru came today in his column and said that Tabani Nyoni is an ignoramus sent by the British Queen to articulate the British's views, but in an articulate manner. He went on abusing the guy, but fundamentally the point that he made, which is linked to the point that I was making, and where I agree with Nathaniel Maneru, is that it is true that even post-1980 there is no regime change that took place in Zimbabwe. That changing a regime is an act that is more than about elections and people emerging as winners or losers. That it has to be something that is a bit more fundamental. And that fundamental process of change did not take place in Zimbabwe in 1980, which is why we have the problems that we have today. And our submission is that if the MDC had won the elections on July 31 and inherited that kind of framework, the possibilities of change would still have been limited, and that we would still have a lot of work to do in terms of ensuring that there's democratization in Zimbabwe. The second reason, of course, is something that has to do with the MDC itself. What we have seen of it, the preponderance towards luxury and largesse. When they were in government, they were acting as if they were brothers to the king, and the very least in behavior. And that in itself is not an indication that those kinds of people can be able to lead the process of fundamental change. So it wouldn't have mattered to us by and large who would have won the election, because we would still be still on a path, of course, an easier one, because we know these people, and to some extent we share some values, but the state itself and its nature is a threat in itself, and that is what needs to be fundamentally changed on the African continent and in Zimbabwe. The point that is linked to that I wanted to make, which again is a point that I'm hoping will resonate with you as an institution, given your history, is an exercise in patience. I've said that I've been learning to be patient and to listen during the course of the last month. I think that democratization and the struggle for democracy on the African continent itself has to be a patient process. It has to be a patient process because democracy on the African continent is not going to be a revolutionary process, it's going to be an evolutionary one. And sometimes we have to count the gains as we get them and see how best we can be able to build on that. Unfortunately, the situation that we find ourselves in Zimbabwe is that when you are then shown that certain elements that are supposed to augment that process towards democratization do not count for nothing, like the elections, where a lot of people feel that their votes did not count or were not counted or were miscounted, or they were forced to vote in a manner that they did not want to vote. You are then faced with challenges that are very difficult for you to embrace. But it is not a cause for either people in Zimbabwe or in the international solidarity movement to lose hope with regards to the process of democratization itself, based on that understanding that it is going to be an evolutionary process and not a revolutionary event that takes place in the context of an election. And I'd say that what then happens politically in Zimbabwe depends on what the state does and what we do as civic society actors and what the international solidarity partners do. In our view, there are three possible routes that the state can take. The state is currently occupied by the Republic of Zimbabwe. They can either choose to backtrack. In other words, they assume that the mandate that they got during the elections is an okaying of their policies as ZANU-PF, and then we go back to the pre-2008 days when they were ruling the roost, of course, to the detriment of the economy of the country and the political space in the country. They can choose to stabilize or to stagnate. In other words, you say we are here, we are not moving forward, but we are also not going to move backwards. Or they can choose to reform and take forward the agenda that Zimbabweans had blessed during the process of the inclusive government, the whole agenda around the new constitution, ensure that laws are aligned so that security laws, like the Public Order and Security Act, which Wandile spoke to, like the insult laws which get people imprisoned if they say the president is old, which is a fact, are taken off the statute books. So they can choose to go in that particular direction. At the moment, indications are that they are not going to do that. Our hope would have been that they would stagnate and not move backwards. But indications seem to be that we are likely to backslide as a country in terms of prospects towards democratization. Why am I saying this? Zimbabwe got a new constitution in March. And last week, one thing that happened, which we thought was very good, was a decision by the Constitutional Court around these insult laws, where they said the insult laws that are there in the country at the moment are unconstitutional and that they need to be struck off the statute books. Immediately after that had happened, the Minister of Justice was given, I think up until the end of this month, to deal with that particular situation. But here is a pronouncement that has been made by the highest court in the land. A couple of days later, the next day actually, you still have people being arrested on allegations that they insulted the president. We've got a member of parliament from the MDC who got arrested because of these insult laws based on something that he said in the past. On the same day the judgment was being made, a number of people were being held in front of courts for insulting the president, basically. Yet it had been deemed to be constitutionally untenable for such a law to be passed. So you've got these indications, these things that seem to indicate that we are moving forward or can be able to carry forward the struggle towards democratization based on what we have attained so far. But at the same time, we also have indications that moving back or backsliding is also a very clear possibility, especially when those who are presiding over the state deliberately choose not to respect judgments, deliberately choose not to abide by the law. So it's a good thing to have the laws, but in law implementation is actually half of the law. And then if it is not implemented or if it is not respected, then you've got a totally different ballgame altogether. Economically, the state of play in Zimbabwe continues also to be untenable. I think, like I said, a lot of things that you can say where Swaziland is concerned, you can say where Zimbabwe is concerned. Of course, with the difference that in Zimbabwe we have diamonds, and in Swaziland they don't. But the difference is the same, because at the end of the day, having those diamonds only means so much to people who are presiding over the state. People have got this tendency of sending pictures on WhatsApp. I know I'm a big guy, but I've always been this big. If you ask people who went to school with me, they'll tell you McDonald was always big. I was the bully in the class because I was big. I've always been big. We have a guy in Zimbabwe called Obed Mpov, who is the former Minister of Mines. Now he's presiding over a different ministry in the new government. But that guy has undergone a tremendous amount of transformation. I got sent, I wish you should have told me that that guy can put up pictures. I got a picture of Obed Mpov from 2007 on my phone, which I got this morning at a prize giving ceremony in Burama, Tebeleland, where he looks exactly like you, comrade in Zimbabwe. Yes, we can teach it. Exactly like you. Now, if you see Obed Mpov today, he looks 3 times bigger than I am. That's the transformation that he has undergone. And to a very large extent, it is only people like him who have seen and yielded the dividends of having diamonds in the country. To the rest of us, it's as good as if we're in Swaziland. It's as good as if we're in Swaziland with no diamonds and surviving off the generosity of other people. That's how bad the situation is. And now that ZANU-PF is presiding over the state, we would have thought that those who have been holding on to diamond revenues in the past and not putting them into the national fiscus would be more prepared to do so. But it doesn't seem as if that is happening. And what's worse, we hear that diamond growth might not last very long, because now people need to be serious about mining diamonds. In the past couple of years, people have been gathering diamonds almost by hand. I hear they are called alluvial diamonds. So you don't have to wait very hard in order for you to get to them. But the alluvial diamonds and the soil that they were found in has since been transported to China, and now we have to dig. We need equipment to try to get to the diamonds on the ground. And it doesn't seem as if that's a process that we are ready for. So even though we have the diamonds, even though we can contribute up to a quarter of the world market in diamonds, even though Brussels and Belgium is lobbying that our diamonds be allowed back onto the international market in December this year, the reality is that there may be no diamonds to speak to in the short term, unless people are serious about investing in that industry and in turn use the revenue from those diamonds to ensure that they actually make a difference for all of us in Zimbabwe. There was a lot of talk also in the immediate aftermath of the elections when President Mugabe promising people a better life, especially civil servants. He said he was going to increase their salaries. The MDC was in charge of the Ministry of Finance and they were refusing to release money for civil servants to get paid. Well, they have been in power for 3 months now. There has been no change that has taken place with regards to civil servant salaries, in spite of Tebeleland being on sabbatical, just like me in America, instead of being in parliament. So that situation prevails, and one would have thought that the situation would have been dealt with through the national budget, which traditionally is usually done in November. But we understand that that process has since been postponed. We don't know whether they are negotiating to get more money from diamonds or whether they simply can't put together a budget. I know Chinamasa is a very good lawyer, but his financial skills are something that I cannot testify to. But beyond that, you also have problems that, with regards to the economy, that I think are more fundamental than just how the government can be able to perform. And I think that at the end of the day, whether you see this as a problem or not depends on where you stand ideologically with regards to how economies need to be run. We have a very serious problem in Zimbabwe where we've got a government that is very good at speaking the language of the left, but which is also very, very adept at acting in a manner that is very, very akin to the right in terms of how they do business. So you've got this ideological speak that is spewed every day by Jonathan Moyo and other people in government around how Zimbabwe will not be a colony again, how we are a sovereign nation, how we're going to look internal to ensure that our economic fortunes are improved. At the same time, we've got the Minister of Finance spending a lot of time in Washington and coming up with a lot of rules and regulations around how to manage and run the economy in order for the IMF and World Bank to get back into the country. And we know from the history on the African continent that the IMF and the World Bank have not really done any good for anyone on the African continent. So as a country, economically, we are caught between a rock and a hard place, where we've got people who have proved that they are inept at running the economy. And instead of looking for meaningful ways of going about that particular process, they go to the West that they are demonizing to get instructions on how to do so. And at the same time, they go to the Chinese. And we know the Chinese are not... China, you say you've got 1.2 million people in Swaziland. China has got close to 1.3 billion. 1.3 billion. So I don't know, 100 times bigger than Swaziland. Their interest is not ensuring the welfare of Zimbabweans and stuff. They want to get resources, they want to sustain their own populations and stuff. So when you deal with them, the interest of the Chinese is on their own people, first and foremost. And those are the options that we have. An inept government going to America to get instructions or dealing with the Chinese who are interested in dealing with their own problems. So where does that leave us economically as a country? And to make matters worse, we don't even have our own currency. We are not in charge of our own monetary policy. We demonize the Americans and use their money. You know, and we are not in control of that. So economically, the picture is also not looking very, very good. But like we said, the path in which we go depends on what we do as different actors. I've already said how the government can be able to act. As civic society and political society in Zimbabwe, I think we also have to take responsibility. I'm rounding up. It should have kept the guy with the cats. Because I know I've already said I've been silent for a month. I was saying I've already said what can happen when Zimbabwe is concerned. That's what the government can be able to do. Now, instead of just talking about what other people can do, so I'll end with what you as Solidarity Partners can be able to do for us. First, perhaps to address ourselves as well. Unfortunately, I don't think we are many here, but for what it's worth, I know it's being filmed, probably end up on YouTube. And maybe Manero will write about me next week and say, well, the spokesperson was doing the bidding of the British in Bulawayo. McDonald was reported to the British in London. That's how it's usually put out. But I think that we also have a responsibility. And part of the challenge that we have had is that we have spent, I was saying to Angela earlier, that in Zimbabwe we've got this saying that whenever a person dies, a witch has to be found. You know? So it doesn't matter if a car runs over me crossing the road, in, they call it what, Great Eastern Road, coming here. Someone is to blame. It's not the car driver, it's probably my brother from Zimbabwe who has said something and ensured that I got run over. And I think that we have been caught up in that process as democratic forces in the country for way too long. Instead of focusing on how what happened on July 31 happened, instead of looking for a deeper understanding around how that election was stolen, a lot of the time we've spent accusing each other. You didn't play your part, you didn't. Of course, we need to introspect, but you need to introspect only for so long, and introspection has got its place. If a robbery takes place in your house, you don't start by looking for who left the window open. You first chase the robber. If you can't catch the robber, then you can talk about who left the window and how they are not supposed to do that again. In Zimbabwe, when we were robbed at the elections, we didn't chase after the robber. We started looking for who left the door open, and we are still doing that up until today. So that's one element. The other element is that for some people, we had invested a lot of hope in the transitional process that had been underway. We thought that if we got an election that is not disputed, that is relatively democratic, it will have an impact on our social and economic welfare as a country. And when it didn't pan out like that, we lost all hope. But we need to get out of that zone as well. Those who talk about mourning, is it mourning or sorrow? It's with periods and phases, denial, what, and what. And we need to get out of it and then pick ourselves up and hope again Hope is not born out of perfect situations. It is born out of terrible situations like the ones that we have and the one that the Swazis have. So we need to get over ourselves and start moving. Now, the International Solidarity Movement, Action for Southern Africa. One of the biggest challenges that I have with Europe and Europeans with regards to the democratization question in Zimbabwe at the moment is that European governments have begun to treat, they've looked too much into this economic competition with China, for instance. And it's the same with the Americans. The Americans are afraid of being taken over as the world's biggest economy. The Europeans are afraid of being taken over as the leading trade partner on the African continent. To such an extent that the question, especially the Zimbabwean political question, has begun to be treated as an economic and technical issue. Yet we know that the crisis that we are in at the moment is a political challenge which emanated from political malfeasance at the beginning of the new millennium. But people have stopped dealing with that question as a political question, which is why you can have the Belgians having the audacity to go and say, let's have the mineral mining board taken off the sanctions list, let's have Zimbabwe diamonds being traded freely without any conditions, because it's a business transactions. And if we don't do it, the Chinese will go and take all the diamonds. If we don't do it, the Chinese will go and take over all the minerals and stuff. That's the kind of thinking that I seem to be thinking, which I think is problematic. So challenge number one for our partners in the international community is that we need to go back to our roots and understand that the Zimbabwean question is a political problem and it needs to be dealt with politically. That we need to repoliticize the conversation around Zimbabwe. So when the European Union meets in February next year in Brussels to discuss the Zimbabwean question, the politics have to be discussed side by side with the economics. So that's one thing. The other thing, to continue to give us hope and strength. I think one of the things that Action for Southern Africa has been able to do very well in its lifespan is to continue to empower people and to give people hope. And we hope that the fact that we have been unsuccessful as a people to move further towards democratization does not deter your efforts towards supporting us. We still need your support, and this is something that, again, has already been said. Actually, let me just say all the recommendations that want to be put forward, I'm putting forward, except for the ones about Glasgow, because we are no longer in the Commonwealth. Robert Mugabe took us out. And if you're not careful, and that is how they do. I was just reading how Yahya Jammeh pulled out of the Commonwealth, I think a couple of days ago. And Swaziland can easily do that. So even as we make it as a recommendation, as we think about what kind of action can be done around the Commonwealth, let us know that our dictators, when they feel that they are going to be put under pressure, they will revert to the colonization question. The colonial masters are dictating to us again. As a result, we are leaving that Commonwealth. But all the recommendations that you made, comrade, I think are valid, and I make them also where Zimbabwe is concerned. Thanks.